Greetings, this is Patty from Natural Law Health, and I've been a little delayed in getting my next video out, but I've got some time right now, so I want to talk about a few topics, one of which is that my live electrical chemistry course is coming up in just a few weeks. It starts March 21st. These courses will be held on Sundays at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, and they'll end at 7:30. So it's a 6-week course just on chemistry, and just to kind of answer some questions that I've been getting about the course. It is meant for introductory students, so you don't really have to have a really strong background in chemistry. We will primarily be focusing on the chemistry that's more important for life, for human life, animal life, and we're not getting into all of the detailed chemistry you would get into like in a full semester college level course. But it is just a 6-week course, a short course focusing on, again, the topics in chemistry that are important for human life and animal life. And we'll get into a couple of esoteric topics with regards to some things in chemistry. And then after that, I'm teaching the cell biology course, which is basically also on Sundays. It follows the chemistry course. And this is going to be focusing on cellular biology. We're going to get into, again, you could take a whole semester of cell biology at a college, but we are focusing on the topics that you need to know about the cell. And the cell is the smallest unit of life. All of our organs, our tissues are made up of cells, and understanding what takes place in the cell is really important to know what happens in the body. Really, our physiology is dependent on healthy cells and the fluids that surround those cells. So I hope you can join me for these two back-to-back courses. They're not back-to-back in one night, they're back-to-back as far as the timeline. So first we'll do 6 weeks of chemistry, and then once the chemistry is done, because that is a prerequisite for the biology course, then we'll get into the biology. And then the biology will be a prerequisite for the human anatomy and physiology course I plan on offering this summer, where this course will be a lot more in-depth, but if you have the chemistry and the biology, you will be prepared for a more rigorous review of the human body. And it's going to be a lot of fun because I'm going to bring into this course a lot of topics that I don't cover in my normal college level course that I teach for my full-time job. So we'll discuss things like, the heart is not a pump. We'll look at the lymphatic system and how the lymphatic system is expanded upon, and we'll look at the lymphatic system in the brain, lymphatic flow to perhaps the kidneys. That's something that's not typically discussed, and just the importance of the lymphatic system. We'll also look at other topics that I think for detoxification specialists would be really better to go into a lot of detail. So the detoxification of all organs and tissues, and how it's important to cleanse, and the importance of its astringent fruits. So we'll get into some diet topics as well. So it's going to be a fun class. I'm really excited about it, but I'll talk more about the human anatomy and physiology course because I really haven't started to develop that course yet, but the chemistry and biology are ready to go. So I wanted to mention that first. Second topic, or second, point of discussion. I am, talking about health. A couple of things that have come up for me lately with regards to health philosophy, because I really think that's what this is. The philosophy of health, of human health. When we look at how allopathic medicine treats the human body, so when you're ill, how does a normal allopathic physician look at your body? Well, keep in mind, allopaths, in their training, they have studied death. So they study the human cadaver. So when I was in medical school, I took a whole year of studying gross human anatomy, where we studied a dead human cadaver. And we cut into every square inch of that cadaver's body, looking at every organ, every, the layers of tissue. And it was a very in-depth overview. And when we look at how even after medical school we look at the human body. We're looking at bodily fluids that are removed from the body. They're not in their normal flow. So blood flow within a blood vessel is a lot different than blood when you're looking at it in a test tube after it's been collected from a vein. And that's really important, I think. These nuances are not really taken into consideration when we are determining the health of somebody. And we're deciding on how to interfere with their normal biochemistry and their normal physiology to evoke some sort of change, usually in the form of suppression. So, when the body is trying to respond to something, when we're not feeling well, when we're ill, when we have some sort of irritation that is entered into our bodily fluids or into an organ or tissue, the first thing our body's going to try to do is get rid of that, release it. And it's really that simple. Again, I bring it back to simplicity. Dr. Morris, my mentor, always brings back these topics to a more simplistic explanation. And in the field of natural health, naturopathy, natural hygiene, it is really that simple. So we start with removing irritation from the body. And so examples of irritation would be just, debris getting into your lungs, you cough it up, right? And usually when there is debris, our cells in their infinite wisdom, the epithelium lining of our respiratory tract, it has goblet cells that release mucus. The mucus traps the inhaled debris. We also have cilia on the surface, the apical surface of those cells, and the cilia is beating that debris in a direction up and away from the gas exchange surfaces in the air sacs or the alveoli of our lungs. Very simple process, right? And assuming that, we don't expose ourselves to a lot of inhaled debris, inhaled irritants, we do that quite effectively. The more you're exposed to these types of inhaled irritants in the form of, smoking or being in a very polluted environment, obviously you're putting more stress on your ability to remove those irritants. And some of those might get stuck because your body, in continually trying to remove that, is going to get a little bit stressed, a little bit overwhelmed. And you might start seeing loss of function. This is what happens with, chronic smoking, and it doesn't matter what you're smoking. Any plant you burn, it's going to create, debris that you inhale. And a lot of that is inflammatory, and it's going to create, an inflammatory reaction. And some of that will involve the cilia no longer beating up and away the debris as effectively. When the cilia die, which is a common response that you see in chronic smokers, then we can't remove those inhaled irritants any longer. And that inflammation starts to become more pronounced in the respiratory tract structures, the bronchioles, the bronchi. Chronic inflammation, when it's not, again, addressed and we keep doing the same thing, you keep smoking, for instance, inflammation becomes tissue change. We call that induration in the naturopathic field. But it's kind of like, the hardening, the sclerosis of the tissue. Sometimes the tissue changes from its normal epithelium, which in a lot of the respiratory tract is a pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. In the smaller bronchioles, it might be, simple cuboidal. But the epithelium is changing. And sometimes that change involves cell proliferation. So you see cell division in the, wisdom of trying to protect itself against the debris. Many layers of cells is more protective than just one layer of cells. And these different types of epithelia lining the respiratory tract are all a single layer of cells. Even the pseudostratified epithelium, it is just one layer of cells touching that basement membrane, not multiple layers. But that changes to a more stratified tissue where you have many layers of cells. And if that cell division continues, because it's continuing to be provoked, you might see then cancerous tissue forming. A lot of lung cancers do begin in the bronchi, bronchioles. So, it's really coming down to the best way to avoid these more chronic issues, these chronic health issues, is to start at the beginning. And obviously, prevention is the best medicine, right? Because if we don't continue to suppress, if you have irritation, cough, and you suppress that cough with a cough medicine, or if you have inflammation and you suppress that with an anti-inflammatory, you're not removing the irritation that initially provoked this whole cascade. What you're doing is you're pushing it deeper into those tissues. And, cancer is a very interesting thing. I've been doing a little bit of study of the history of cancer and looking at just, over the many, many years of cancer development, or I should say treatment. It's been pretty rough on patients. It really has. These scientists and these physicians that use these cancer therapies, they're so focused on reducing tumor size. I mean, they will do so that, reducing the tumor is way more important than the holistic health of the patient. I mean, a lot of cancer therapy drugs, they get approved because they show evidence of reducing tumor size, but they don't show any evidence of enhancing the length of a patient's life, the quality of the patient's life. I mean, a lot of these, especially chemotherapy drugs, are so toxic on all of our bodily cells and tissues. I mean, these are acidic chemicals that we're injecting into our blood, and it's circulating throughout our body, and it's spreading toxicity. So you already have a person that's very weak and damaged because they have some sort of cancer that they've been diagnosed with. So that's already putting them at a huge disadvantage. The fact that people survive chemotherapy, it just shows me how resilient the human form is and how much we can take and still bounce back. So, I do, when I work with clients, as, my part-time job of being a detoxification specialist and naturopath, I never will tell a client what to do. I might share with them what I would do if I were in their position. And I will also share with them, ideas of what to, if they're working with a medical professional that's, advising them of these different therapies. I would ask for them to get more information about what those therapies will do. And will those therapies align with their expectations? Because a lot of cancer patients, especially, do not know the effects of these drugs. They think, oh, I'm going to take this chemotherapy for 6 to 8 weeks and the cancer will be cured, and then I'm going to live, another 50 years so that I can see my children's children grow up and life's going to be great. Little do they know is that therapy, based on the research and the trials, has been shown to extend life for maybe, an extra several months or an extra several years. And while you're taking the therapy, you're incredibly ill, in a lot of pain. I mean, it's just harsh on the body. I mean, you've seen people that are taking chemotherapy. They lose their hair. It's attacking fast-dividing cells. And so the hair follicles, those cells that grow our hair, those are fast-dividing cells. The cells lining the entire digestive tract, those are fast-dividing cells. So there's a lot of nausea and intense sickness. So, I share these things with people because I think that we as humans that are embarking on the decision-making process of trying to determine what's the best for our health, you have to ask questions and you have to be your own advocate. So coming back to allopathy, allopathic physicians are trained to study death. They're really good at knowing what a dead person should look like and how to look at things removed from the body that are not part of life. When our bodily fluids, our blood, our lymphatic fluids, our interstitial fluids, when they're in our body, it's part of us. It's part of that miracle of life. It has an energy, a spin, a vortex. And, that's why I really like the more esoteric teachings in anthroposophical medicine, a whole branch of medicine brought to us by Rudolf Steiner, where he's looking at the spirit in conjunction with the physical form. And, I think on one of the preceding videos, I mentioned the fourfold human being. We have the physical form, we have the etheric body, we have the astral body, and then we have the kind of ego or I. And, we share some of those forms with other life forms, with, the plants. They have the formative or the etheric body as well as a physical body. And then the animals, in addition, they have those two bodies plus the astral body. But the humans, we have the ego or I. And, that gives humans a capacity, a greater capacity to do things. We have knowing of our own knowingness. And we have a will that can guide. And if we tune into that, we can guide our own healing, perhaps, right? We can create art. These are things animals can't do, but, just because animals cannot do those things doesn't mean they deserve less respect. I think all life is sacred. All life is amazing. It's a miracle. How cells behave within a plant or an animal or a human. There are a lot of similarities. Okay, and I was getting, a little negative feedback about my comparison of humans and animals. I do understand that humans have a profound capacity to create. We have an imagination. Imagination is said to be the sorcerer's stone. It's at the heart of what, at the essence, humanity is here to do. We're here to create something and to evolve our knowing of who we really are. Right now, in my opinion, I think the powers that should not be are suppressing that imagination. And how do they suppress it? Well, a lot of the chemicals that are used in allopathic medicine, especially the injectable ones that start with the letter V, those really wreak havoc on the body. I mean, they provoke an immune response inappropriately. It's funny, I'm, right now in my the college course that I teach full time, we are talking about the immune system. And I don't bring, unfortunately, I'm teaching for students going into the allopathic field. They're going to be future doctors and nurses taking my courses. And I don't, bring up controversial topics in my course, mostly because we have so much to cover. I mean, a whole year-long human anatomy physiology course, it is just, it's hard to cover it all anyway, let alone me bringing in controversial topics like the V word. But, I share with them and I stress that especially our cell-mediated immune response, which involves cells, lymphocytes, called cytotoxic T cells. You do not want to provoke these cytotoxic T lymphocytes without cause. You do not want to provoke them inappropriately. And that's what you're doing when you're injecting something into your body. You're provoking an immune response unnaturally. First of all, you're totally bypassing our first defense, and that's our skin. Our skin, when it's intact, not cut open, it's going to protect us, right? Those many layers of cells, we do have a stratified epithelium that is keratinized in the epidermis of our skin. It is protecting us against everything from getting into the deeper layers where our blood and our lymphatic vessels reside. We don't want anything getting into those bodily fluids where it can start circulating and wreaking havoc in our tissue spaces. So, that's what this vaccine's doing. They're injecting it through those layers into your bodily fluids. And then what are they injecting? Well, in their proposition, they're just injecting an antigen that's going to provoke an immune response. And what they want to do really is provoke antibody production, because antibodies are like little red flags that bind to things that look foreign, and it helps other phagocytic cells like macrophages come and gobble it up. So it's like a little red flag that says, hey, I'm abnormal, I shouldn't be in the body, please gobble me up. But, these antigenic components in these vaccines usually are not strong enough by themselves to evoke antibody production. And that's, allopathic mentality. That's what they're looking for, right? That's like the golden ticket. You got to get those antibodies because that's how you know you're protected, right? So they have to add things to that antigen. They call these adjuvants. And adjuvants help to strengthen the immune response. Unfortunately, a lot of what they use to strengthen the immune response are toxic, like aluminum is a common adjuvant. They used to use thimerosal, which contained mercury, and I still think they're using mercury today. They just get away with it by using different functional groups on the mercury. So mercury is toxic. It's a neurotoxin. Polysorbate 80 is a adjuvant. It's something that can, help cross the blood-brain barrier, another protective layer that protects our very fragile, and I don't want to call it fragile, but it's very sensitive. Our nervous tissue in our brain is very sensitive. So we're bypassing all of these, and we're getting these antigens and all of the toxic chemicals mixed with it into our bodily fluids, all in the hope to evoke antibody production. And now antibody production is just one branch of our immune system. The cell-mediated immunity will probably be provoked as well. And again, that involves the cytotoxic T cells, which are like the Navy SEALs of our immune system. They have the heavy-duty chemicals that directly kill virally infected cells and cancer cells. That's what these cells do. And they can directly kill any cell if they're provoked. And then when you, again, haphazardly provoke the other branch of our immune system, the antibody-mediated or the humoral immune response, you're causing a lot of antibodies to be produced. And what's another thing where you get a lot of antibodies being produced unnecessarily? Oh yeah, that's autoimmune disorders. And there's a big link between a lot of autoimmune disorders and having been previously vaccinated. My mentor again, Dr. Robert Morris, who I love this man, he says that, autoimmune disorders are just kind of like doctors saying, I don't know what it is. And that's really what it comes down to. They don't know. They don't understand these links because they have been trained not to associate vaccines with any negative outcomes. Because all they do is they look at what the pharmaceutical reps give them, which is, there's no link between vaccines and anything negative. Vaccines are completely safe. So, of course, when people develop autoimmune disorders, they look at them as idiopathic, like, unknown cause. It just spontaneously showed up. It's probably because it was provoked. And in autoimmune disorders, we have a lot of antibodies being produced, right? And that's what you want when you get vaccinated, a lot of antibodies. In fact, they measure antibodies in your blood plasma because they're looking for whether or not you're protected. Those are called titers. So you get a lot of antibodies with autoimmune disorders as well. So anyway, I know I kind of touched on a lot of different topics. These topics, though, I'm mentioning them because in my science courses that I'm going to be providing, that I'm working with Dr. Robert Morse on these science courses as part of his larger holistic school, which is so exciting, by the way. I just was chatting with him last night, and we're bringing on board so many people from kind of the natural health field. People that work in traditional Chinese medicine, bodybuilders that have worked with raw fruits and vegetables to build clean, healthy muscle tissue. All of these amazing souls that understand, have worked with nature to live a life where we don't inject chemicals, where we don't take in anything unnatural, but we're just living a life of purity. We're living a life of a clean body. And because that's really what it's all about, right? It was funny talking to Dr. Morris last night. He wants to get more into the spiritual levels, but because there's so much suffering on this planet, he's brought down to the physical form over and over again because he's a man of a huge heart and he doesn't like to see people suffering. None of us do. I think all of us that go through his detoxification specialist program, we're doing it because we see a need for this information to spread. And all I want to do is I want to take the sciences and bring forth a better understanding of how things happen and what we can do to explain how we can not only reverse ill health, but also prevent it, because I think prevention is the best. So I will end this video here. There will be more details about the 2 classes that I currently have available on my website down below. I hope you can all join me. I would love to have as many people as possible, just all interacting, and other things about the class I don't want to forget to add. These courses will be recorded. So I know I have gotten a lot of feedback from people that live overseas, that live in Australia, Europe. You will be able to watch the recordings if you're in a different time zone and you can't meet for the live classes. I also plan on having a Telegram group where we will have a lot of interaction. It's going to be kind of like a discussion board where you can ask questions for me. I'll be checking in with it routinely. Other people can comment, and we can make it a big interactive group where we're all kind of asking questions and responding to those questions and learning together. But the recordings will be held on a separate website, and also on that separate website you'll be taking weekly quizzes as well as taking your final exam. And then I will provide for you at the very end, as long as you pass your quizzes and exam with a 70% or greater, you'll get a certificate of completion. And if you don't pass with a 70% or greater, you just have to take the assignments over again until you understand it and you can, have a better foundational knowledge before you move on to that next class, because these classes are meant to build upon each other. Because it does allow me, when I'm teaching like the more advanced human anatomy and physiology course, to get into some deeper topics and use some terminology that, we introduced in these earlier classes. So anyway, I hope you all are doing well and, staying strong in your knowing of what the truth is, not letting the propaganda bring you down, not letting, the news scare you. Better yet, turn off the TV. I haven't had a television since 2012, and I recommend that as my first step to anybody that wants to kind of get out of this rat race of just nonsense and propaganda and suppression and fear. This is not what human life is supposed to be about. We are supposed to be healthy, we're supposed to be vibrant, we're supposed to have vitality, and we're supposed to, again, expand into spiritual realms where we can really know who we are and what our human destiny is. So thank you. Have a beautiful day, evening, wherever you're watching this, and I will see you next time.